It's been a long time. This morning, someone said, he's like the prodigal son. And someone else chimed in, no, he's like the prodigal father. But I want you to know that in the stretches of time between our seeing each other, I pray for you, and I hope you pray for me. We need that from each other, right? I have two stories this morning. The first is about a man named Nicholas George Winton. Does anybody know his story already? Nicholas Winton was born in 1909. He is the son of Jewish parents from a German parentage. He was moved with his family from somewhere in Europe to the UK, to Britain. In 1938, he's become a successful professional. A friend of his writes from the embassy in Switzerland and invites him to Switzerland in 1938 for a visit. He thinks it's for a ski vacation, and he quickly hears from his friend, don't bring your skis, but be prepared for anything. When he arrives, his friend brings him to Czechoslovakia, where he sees that his friend has been working in camps, refugee camps, for Jewish people who have been displaced from around Europe. And Nicholas's heart is broken open by what he sees. The harsh conditions in these camps, even supported by allies, but especially the children. And within a very short period of time, it becomes unmistakably clear the direction that the German people were going under Nazism and how in jeopardy these children were. He and his friend cook up an amazing plan to transport over 600 of these children to Britain for safekeeping. He knows that even if Britain is pulled further into the war, at least they'll be safer than in the direct path of the Nazis. Now, 626 children to be brought through Europe at tremendous expense and logistical complexity, right? How to pull this off and to get them to families who can care for them. But Nicholas sees this tremendous need. And as the descendant of Jewish people and as one who had to flee in World War I, he understands himself how important it is to reach out and to help when we have an opportunity to do so. He is successful, but nobody ever knows about his amazing good deed. 40 years later, his then wife is up in the attic and she finds files describing details of these 626 children, about the places that they were brought to in England to be resettled, about, in some cases, their current addresses. She is amazed. She says nothing to her husband, but quietly she's so proud of him, and she wants to find some way to celebrate this amazing and heroic deed. A few years later, it took that long to get in touch with all these people. He's invited to a celebration in Czechoslovakia with his wife. And because he has family in the area, he goes, and he's seated in the front row of this celebration and has no idea it's actually for him. He's an elderly man then, and as the MC is going through the ceremony, she startles him by saying, "We welcome Nicholas George Winton, who is in the front row." And at that point, a woman, not his wife, sitting next to him, reaches over to touch his hand. And he looks into her eyes, and there's a moment of recognition that she is one of those children. At that moment, he's startled, and the MC continues, "And we would ask that all of those whose lives depended on Nicholas George Winton stand up." And over 100 people, now in their 50s and 60s, stand up behind him, surrounding him. He looks around, and this is a humble man, and he's wiping away the tears under his glasses as he stands looking at these people, beaming at him, knowing that their lives were all dependent on him. Now, that was in 1988. Last summer, at 104 years old, he was interviewed by people. He's still alive. He's having a little trouble keeping his dentures in, I must say, in the interview. But when he was asked how could he imagine doing something so audacious, he said, "I couldn't do anything but help. I was put in a place to make a difference, and it was within my means to help to do so. How could I not do this?" He saw with the light of his own eyes this need, this necessity, and acted. And then, when asked how he could keep it secret all those years, he said, "It wasn't for me to tell this to the world." But fortunately, his wife did. And his story inspired many to sort of come out of the closet, if you will, and tell their stories, edifying us with their heroism, with the goodness of their deeds, with the way that they were light in darkness. Now, a little more modest, but no less beautiful a story. I was a young priest working in Long Island in a parish, a Jesuit parish called St. Anthony's. We were a short distance from the ocean at Long Beach, and I would take walks up and down this beautiful boardwalk. Maybe you've been there. And there's memorial benches set all along the boardwalk, benches dedicated to family members who have died in the last years. Probably people who spent time at the beach and found it a beautiful place to contemplate and to find their joy. But as I was walking early one morning, I noticed a young woman in her mid-20s, and she had a big bundle of flowers. And she was posting flowers, pasting them really with tape on each of these memorial benches as she went. I was sort of surprised by this, not just one bench, but all of them. And then as I was making my way back, I came across a family who discovered the bench dedicated to the father of their family with these flowers. And they were wondering and delighted that someone would remember him. A few months later, I was at a restaurant and I was convinced the waitress looked familiar to me. And finally it dawned on me, it must have been her. And I said, "By any chance, do you put flowers on benches down at Long Beach?" And she looked at me with a surprised face and said, "No. But I have to say I'm pretty good with faces." So at the end of dinner, I said, You are that woman who places flowers on benches down at Long Beach." And she said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Well, I was so moved when you did that and inspired, and I saw families and the joy that it brought them." I said, "Why do you do that?" And she said, "Well, my mother died a few years ago, and I can't afford a bench. But every year on her anniversary, I can afford to bring flowers to all of those benches." And I thought, my gosh, how beautiful. Whoopi Goldberg was once quoted as saying, "In our human lives, the purpose of our lives is to throw out lit torches into the darkness for others." I think she was inspired by maybe Isaiah and Jesus and Paul, who knew that actions speak so much louder than words, and that it is so vital that each of us become a lamp in the darkness for others, not calling attention to ourselves, but to the goodness of our actions, to the generosity and the unselfishness of our actions. And that as lamps, we can shine light on the good deeds of others as well and celebrate them. And that when we do, we lift everyone with inspiration and hope and light in darkness. When our media becomes so preoccupied with the disasters and the kind of conflicts and the dark things that cause us fear and undermine our trust in the goodness of our species, We need to be the ones shining the light on these good stories and allowing our own deeds to shed light in dark places in the world.